and welcome Ebrahim, Professor Ebrahim Moosa. As most of you know, Ebrahim Moosa is a colleague of Imam Rashid Omar at Notre Dame University and is the Abdullah Mirza Chair at Notre Dame. So I'm not going to delay us any further and hand over to Ebrahim just to say shukran once again for giving us of your time. We appreciate it very much and look forward to your tafsir of Surah Taha.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace and salam and to all the friends and colleagues who are on this call. So I'm going to talk about certain aspects of Surah Taha today. I'm not going to talk about the entire surah. I'm going to have selections that I thought that those sections of the surah that resonate with me, even though everything resonates, but I just wanted to highlight a few themes. So as most of you know, Surah Taha is the 20th chapter of the Quran. It's a Meccan surah. It's a surah revealed in Mecca. And it is round about estimated, it was revealed around about the year 8 of the Hijrah. So that means that 8 years after the Prophet ﷺ declared himself to be a warner, a nadhir, and a prophet, the Muslims were in a small minority and a very small community in Mecca. And it was also the time where there was a few of them left Mecca to seek refuge in Abyssinia. Now, as you know, that there were two groups of Muslims on two occasions sought refuge in Abyssinia, known as the Hijrah, the first Hijrah to Abyssinia. There were a small group of people went first, and then a larger group went later on. Some dispute whether there were actually two such events, and maybe just one, but nevertheless, is around about that time. And there's also some historical significance about this. Now, I don't know why okay. So there's a couple of themes in this surah, the kind of major themes that I identify. I think the opening is what I call a magisterial opening, a really great and beautiful opening that is extremely moving. Then there's a second set of narratives in the surah, the story of Moosa, Harun, and Pharaoh, that is quite elaborate in the surah. And we will only pick a theme from that surah. Then there's a lot going on in the surah about scenes of the hereafter. The scenes of the hereafter, what will happen to those who obey, and what will happen to those who disobeyed. So they're extremely moving and graphic descriptions of the hereafter. Then there is the fourth theme there, which is Adam's story of forgetting the commandment not to eat the forbidden fruit. And that is also, we'll pick a sliver from that theme because it's a theme that we've heard over and over already. But I'm just going to pick on one aspect. And then is what I call the big moral lesson. The big moral lesson is the story of history and the story of the anxiety of the Prophet about the Quran and how Allah then guides him and reassures him. So it's about anxiety, forgetfulness, and the story of the need to have resolve that comes out of the Adam story. So as we know, the surah starts with Taha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'an litashqa illa tadhkiratan liman yakhsha تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى. These are very evocative verses of the Holy Quran. And I think that you will agree with me that it has very powerful messages. And so we will go through these first 8 verses very, very carefully and with a certain amount of reflection. So as you know that the word Taha, these are known as the huruf al-muqatta'at, those kind of symbolic letters that come at various parts of the surah. Many surahs of the Quran have these letters. They are deemed to be symbolic code that only some do understand. Some people spend a lot of time trying to explain this and to give some kind of meaning. I would say I would categorize these amongst the mushabbahat, mutashabihat, those verses that are unclear. And there are some people who would spend a lot of time deliberating over that. The other thing we know is from the tradition, as the Prophet ﷺ was also addressed as Taha. That was another name for the Prophet ﷺ, Taha. So the second verse says, we did not reveal the recital to you that you should be distressed. This idea that the Quran became somehow a source of distress to the Prophet ﷺ. What this means is that the Prophet ﷺ took this responsibility of the revelation that was given to him. He took it extremely seriously. And it seems that he engaged in long vigils at night of prayer and contemplation. And he also put himself through extra hardship. So he would try and stand in his qiyamul layl, in his nightly vigils, on one leg. In other words, put the other leg by his knee and stand on one leg so that he doesn't fall asleep, or so that he can concentrate and he can recite the verses that his Lord has revealed to him. So the Quran reassures him here and in other places of the surah that you should not be distressed. In another place of the Quran it says, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikr wa inna lahu lahafidhun." We are the ones, Allah says, we take responsibility to have given you the revelation and we will be his protectors. But I think what this verse 2 deals with is with the psychology of the Prophet ﷺ, the way he understands and receives this revelation. He sees it as a great burden, as a responsibility. And then the verse 3 says, إِلَّا تَذْكِرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. This is a reminder for those who are weary, in other words, those who are alert, those who are the one who is reverentially fearing. So khashya means it connects with taqwa, man khashya rahmana bil ghaybi. Those who have a certain kind of reverential fear, khashya, or humble care and concern with humility. That's called khashya. And so what this Quran is identified with, that is a reminder for a certain category of people who have khashya. this idea of khashya is very important, because if you don't come to the Quran biqalbin munib, with a heart that is ready, and a heart that is come to Allah with inaba, with a certain kind of readiness to receive, then it can have very little effect on the heart. And therefore, the Quran is, as verse 4 says, تَنْزِيلًا مِمَّنْ خَلَقَ الْأَرْضَ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ الْعُلَى. It's a revelation of the one who created the earth and the heavens on high. So just as when you look around and you look at the creation of the heavens and earth, and you see what a majestic creation this is, how complicated it is, how trees and birds and animals and vegetation, and the more we learn about our cosmos, how extraordinary our cosmos is, how great it grows at the more our knowledge extends into understanding what the canopy above us is all about. When we begin thinking about it, when we think about, these various stars in the sky that we see at night, that every star is like we experience our sun, but it is light years away, and its heat doesn't reach us. That just gives you an idea. The closest of these stars to us is our sun, that gives us heat and the source of our energy. So the connection that the author of this canopy and the author of this earth is also the author of the revelation. So immediately connects you with the creator and said, this revelation in front of you, of which the surah is just one installment, is the author of this teaching that you have in front of you. And verse 5 says that this author of the revelation and the creator of the heavens and earth is Ar-Rahman. Is Ar-Rahman, and the one who is the benevolent one, the most merciful one. The merciful, and Ar-Rahim is the one who dispenses mercy. But Ar-Rahman is the benevolent one. And what is the stature of the Ar-Rahman? Ar-Rahman sits firmly on the throne. This idea of the throne and Allah being seated on the throne is a way to make us recognize that Allah is King. Allah is Lord. Allah is sovereign. What is the king's role? That historically we understand what kingship is, that the king is sovereign. The king's command has to be enforced. So Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa, firmly seated on the throne. Lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ardi wa ma baynahuma wa ma tahta thara. To whom belongs what is in the heavens, what is on the earth, what is in between, and what is under the ground. And so, in many ways, when we think about this verse, it makes us understand that we are actually not owners, but leaseholders on this earth, because everything belongs to the sovereign who created the earth and the heavens. We take whatever we use on here with responsibility. We have to use it with responsibility because we acknowledge who Allah is, and therefore we don't have absolute right over what is, on earth and what is under the ground. And this message, as in other places of the Quran, we are taught to be responsible vicegerents, responsible stewards of the creation. And we need to, fulfill that responsibility of being good stewards. That's what Khilafah is all about. Khilafah means stewardship. Stewardship means responsibility. And here the verse 6 is basically trying to tell us that true and proper ownership belongs to Allah alone. That means our relationship with our materiality and with the material resources around us must be very different from those who think that they own it fully and they can do with it and dispose of it whatever way they can. I think the message here is no, you have to do it responsibly. And I think with the environmental crisis now fully engulfing us, and everywhere we're having great difficulties. You had it in South Africa a couple of days ago, with this extreme weather patterns in KwaZulu-Natal, and around the world. In the US, you have until a couple of months ago, extreme fires in California and so on. And in different parts of the Amazon is burning. All this tells us we have to have a fundamental change in our relationship with our surrounding. And that is that we need to become more responsible stewards of how we dispose of trash, how we consume certain things, what kind of means of containers that we use, the threat of plastic, the destruction that plastic has done to parts of the ocean. It's just extremely irresponsible the way we have been dealing with our consumption and our disposal in the last 100 years. People say that near the Philippines, there's an area of the ocean there that the size of Texas, filled with dump and waste that cannot be easily disposed of and will not disappear for a long time. And the damage it does to the environment and to marine life is just extraordinary. So belonging, if we understand this, that this is a lease from Allah, the hope is that we will treat our environment and the world in which we live with greater responsibility. And the Prophet ﷺ is told, if you proclaim the word, Allah knows the secret and the most hidden. So the Prophet, being very anxious about making the proclamation and announcing the word, but Allah knows, Allah knows everything that you're doing. Allah knows how sincere you are. Allah knows how determined you are. Allah knows what your resolve is, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And He knows your concern, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was extremely concerned about his people accepting Islam. And he's been told frequently, إِنَّكَ لَن تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. You cannot guide those that you love and that you prefer. God is the one who gives guidance. Or he's told that you will that you will destroy yourself, that they, your own people, will become true believers. Now, obviously, the Prophet ﷺ had a very strong relationship with his own people. In that world, if your own people don't accept you and they don't see you as a person of integrity and a person of righteousness and acceptance, then it was a great source of pain. Because if your own family members, your own tribe, your own kin don't take you seriously, it is a burden that human psychology suffers with. Now, I think all of us fully understand that prophets are outcasts in their own communities. And because they have to say certain things that people don't like, and they have to be true to their calling, and they cannot sugarcoat it, and they cannot make it more appealing, because the truth has to be told, and therefore people will oppose them. But then Allah gives him the reassurance that there's no other deity to the most beautiful names belong to Allah. And so these beautiful names that this verse announces here, that we talk about the 99 names of Allah, that is to give the Prophet ﷺ a reassurance that these names of Allah, the various names, the just, the beautiful, the Rahman, the Rahim, the strong, the generous, and these 99 names that these are all the attributes of Allah, and that we as human beings can access those attributes and make ourselves better. Therefore, we are always told, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ. Internalize the attributes of Allah. So Allah will have it in a perfect sense, we will have it in an imperfect sense, but we are constantly imitating those perfect names of Allah. And we must develop a relationship with those names. That is the other important thing, to develop that very sound relationship with these beautiful names. So the time that this story, this verse is revealed, the historical context is that the Muslims are in a minority, they are in an extremely weak situation, and that the Prophet ﷺ, realizing the political weakness of himself and his community, he wanted to, and he prayed that Allah strengthen Islam with one of two people. And one of those two people that he prayed that Allah strengthen Islam with was with Omar. So there are two versions of this story of Omar. Abdullah binti Abi Hathma, she tells a story that she meets Omar in the Omar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu in the streets of Mecca. And he sees that she's busy and she's preparing for something. And it seems that he was aware of her plans to leave for Abyssinia. So he says to her, Ya Ummi Abdullah, seems that you are very busy, seems that you're going on a trip. And Omar is very much moved and touched by the fact that one of his kinswomen, that she has to leave her own home because of the persecution that he is part of. He is persecuting her. But on this occasion, he doesn't persecute her, but he has this exchange with her. And she said to him, you've harmed us enough. You've caused us enough harm, O Omar. You guys have been persecuting us. And Omar's response was, may Allah be with you. Now remember, Omar is not a Muslim yet. But the word Allah was known to the Meccans because they thought of Allah as a high deity, and this deity had a relationship with all the other smaller deities. So he did say, may Allah be with you. Obviously, we know that the word Allah is then also the same word without any alteration is then used in Islam to indicate the creator of the world. So when Abdullah, when she shares it with one of her companions, this exchange with her and Omar, he tells her, did you wish for him to accept Islam? And she said, yes. But the companion was more pessimistic. He said that, he will not convert. Even if the donkey of Omar converts to Islam, Omar will not convert. In other words, he was seen as a stubborn and a lethal enemy, that his donkey would accept Islam before he would do so, or so many thought. So that's the one version. The other version is that, the other version is that Omar attends a council in Mecca, where they used to meet in the Nadi, in the Nadwa, and they were determined to harm the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet at that moment was in a house near Safa with 40 people. As Omar leaves that council meeting, he has his sword unsheathed, and he meets a man by the name of Nu'aym ibn Abdullah. And Nu'aym had converted, but it doesn't seem that Omar knows that Nu'aym had converted. So he says, where are you going in such a hurry, Omar? He says, well, I'm gonna just deal with Muhammad. He's just now done enough. I'm just gonna deal with him. Nu'aym said to him, if you are going to do this to Muhammad, you know that there's going to be a reaction. Muhammad's people, alayhi salam, is not going to leave you alone. You are basically writing your own death warrant, Nu'aym tells him. But Nu'aym knows where the Prophet is, and it seems that Nu'aym knows that Omar knows exactly where the Prophet is. So Nu'aym tries to divert him from the Prophet. And he says, Omar, your sister Fatima and her husband, your brother-in-law, Sa'id ibn Zayd ibn Amr, they have converted. Might sort out your own house before you try and, sort out the Prophet. And Omar says, really? That really happened? And obviously, he takes a quick turn to his sister's home, and he barges into the house. But before he barges into the house, he overhears first, he's spying on them. And he heard that they were reciting some verses. So those verses moved him, but he was in such anger that he kicked open the door. He goes in and he immediately assaults his sister, Fatima, because she's now betrayed the Meccan religion. And in the anger, she starts bleeding, and he sees blood. Omar stops, because now the bonds of family violence and so on all makes him stop in his step, and makes him think what he's doing, and he obviously is ashamed of himself. And he calms down, and he says to his sister, let me read what you people have been reading, because he overheard what they were reading when he was spying on them from the closed door. And she said to him, no, you cannot read it. You are impure, or you're going to destroy what we have. In the meanwhile, Khubab, who was the teacher of these two, was trying to teach them. He hid away somewhere in a closet. And now that they saw things calm down, he came out. And his sister Fatima told Omar she must take ablutions first. And he makes the ablutions. He assures her that he's not going to destroy whatever primitive piece of writing they had with these verses and so on. And then he reads these verses and he says, Ma ahsan al-kalam, what beautiful speech, what beautiful, teaching this is. And obviously now Omar is now ready to go to the Prophet, Ma ahsan al-kalam, wa ma akrama. What beautiful speech, and what noble speech this is. And these are the opening verses that he reads, Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa illa tadhkiratan liman yakhsha. And the verses continue, and those are the verses that move Omar. When Omar comes to the Prophet ﷺ, at that house near Safa, obviously we know that the companions are very alert, and they're not entirely sure what Omar's intentions are. They let him through, but they got their swords out, and the Prophet then says, let him come in, and then embraces him. And Omar then declares the Shahada. And when Omar declares the Shahada, he's now so bold, he goes out into the Haram of Mecca, and he now announces a declaration. And obviously the Meccans are extremely disappointed, because this is the guy who was supposed to take off Muhammad's head, and now he has now become a follower of Muhammad. So it's extremely important, crucial turning point in the history of Islam, with Omar converting. And no wonder Omar had such a major role in the his time with the Prophet, but also in the post-prophetic period. A man of great wisdom and insight, a man of extreme emotions, anger, but also kindness, and a sense of fairness. And that was the nature of Omar as a companion and as one of the senior companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Then So we fast forward and we go to, the story of Moosa. And the story of Moosa is an interesting one because, this is a long story, as we all know it, what Pharaoh did to the Israelites and to the children of Bani Israel, and how we oppressed them, and how the boy children were killed every other year. And Moosa is now instructed to go and talk to Pharaoh. And Moosa is very insecure. Again, a lot of anxiety that Moosa has. And they ask this prayer, say, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. My Lord, expand my breast for me, my heart for me. Literally, it is the breast, but in the breast is the heart. And the heart is the place of courage. As people say, you must have heart, have courage. So my Lord, give me courage. Wa yassir li amri, and ease my task for me. And Moosa, as we know, had a speech deficiency. He had a disability of speech. People say he stuttered. And so he asked for the stutter to be calmed, or that be some remedy for that. And so that they may understand my speech. Yafqahu qawli. I think this is a very important lesson for those of us who are in public service and speak to communities. We have to speak to people that they understand. Yafqahu qawli. The speech must be clear. But the other thing that Moosa realizes that he needs help. And so he says, give me a counselor from my family. And, Aaron, my brother. And with Aaron, my brother, increase my strength through him. In other words, I need assistance. And when I have assistance, I have solidarity. If I have solidarity, my confidence rises. Because remember, Moosa says, Rabbi shrah li sadri. He says, give me heart, give me courage, and make my task easy. And now Moosa is very quick. He has a list of things that he's asking Allah for. I don't speak well, so you need to help me in my clarity of my speech. So give me Aaron as my supporter. I get strengthened through him. Wa ashriku fi amri, and have him share in my task. And here the question is whether sharing in the task, in other words, did Aaron, was he also a prophet? Or did he have the same mission as Moosa? As we know that when Moosa goes away, Harun, stays, but some people cause mischief, and Moosa is extremely angry. But Harun gives him a very interesting answer. He says, I was trying to use my wisdom and let these miscreants continue with doing what they were doing, because I did not want to cause division in our community. So that was quite a wise answer that Harun gave Moosa when Moosa was very angry with him. Why did you let these people make the golden calf? Why did you let them do that? And he was saying, listen, I made a judgment call. The judgment call might not have been a good one, but this was my reasoning. So Harun shares his reasoning. So make him have a share in my task. Now here comes the beautiful part. كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. This is beautiful. كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. That we may glorify you greatly. We can make tasbih of you. We can glorify you and sing your praises. And we can remember you much, because you are, after all, the creator of the heavens and the earth. You are the owner of what is on the earth and what is beneath it. You've already convinced us of that. But give us time that we can celebrate you with our tongues. And furthermore, when we remember you, when we glorify you, we know that we will have your attention. You can see us. إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا, that you will see us. And what does it mean when he says that, you can see us? That means that the divine attention will be on them. They'll have the reassurance, they will have the sakina, they will have that calmness in their hearts. They will have contentment. So there's a very, very interesting way we can think about this, that Moosa is a prophet. He's got a big responsibility. He asks for assistance. And he's basically saying that when our tasks are shared, we might have some spare time. And in that spare time, when we are not busy trying to deal with our people, we want to glorify you, want to sing your praises, and we want to remember you much, and we want to gain your attention. Now, I'm going now to the section where I said, the big moral. So I got 3 things to say about the big moral that comes towards the end of the surah. The first comes from, what are the lessons of history? What does this surah tell us about history? Because, it says, إِنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ Allahu alladhi la ilaha illa huwa. It's a declaration that Allah is the deity and He's worthy of worship. There's nothing other than Him. وَسِعَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. Okay, and Allah comprehends, all things in knowledge. كذلك نقص, I think, find resolve in him that that line is a typo. I need to correct it. I should have. I somehow missed that editorial change that I should have done. He's worthy of worship. God comprehends all things in knowledge. Then the next thing is that, we telling you and relating to you the accounts of what has happened before. كذلك نقص عليك من أنباء ما قد سبق وقد آتيناك من لدنا ذكرا. We relate to you accounts of what has happened before, and we have brought you a message from us. So all these stories of Harun and Moosa and Isa and Dawood and Sulaiman and prophets that and prophets that are unnamed, Allah says that these stories have a certain role. They are what we call a message. They are a message to you. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَحْمِلُ يَوْمَ القِّيَامَةِ وِزْرًا خَالِدِينَ فِيهِ وَسَاءَ لَهُمْ يَوْمَ القِّيَامَةِ حِمْلًا. Okay? Whoever turns away from it will bear burden on the day of resurrection, to be forever in that state of misery, and they will be miserably burdened on the day of resurrection. So the moral story of history is that you need to think and you have to reflect. And in several other places in the Quran, you are told, أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Do they not reflect? Do they not understand? أَفَلَا يَفْقَهُونَ. Do they not understand? These stories are not given just for entertainment value, but also for you to take ibrah. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَا ibrah. In this is a lesson, a moral lesson. What is a ibrah? Ibrah is to connect the dots between a story that you know and a message that you might find. In Arabic, a bridge is called a ma'bar. You go from this side to that side. A tear that rolls down your eyes is called a abar. When a tear rolls down your eyes, it rolls down, it crosses from your ear over your cheek. So everything that rolls over, that connects, that bridges, is that from that root where the word ibrah comes from. In other words, you must connect the dots and understand the big picture. If you don't connect the dots, if you only understand, the small picture, these individual things and you don't understand the big picture, according to the Quranic teachings, you have missed the lesson. And the big lesson is history, that actions have consequences. Actions have consequences, number one. And number two, history is about, self-knowledge. History is about knowing yourself. And verse 128 also says of Surah Taha, أَفَلَمْ يَهْدِ لَهُمْ كَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا قَبْلَهُم مِنَ الْقُرُونِ يَمْشُونَ فِي مَسَاكِنِهِمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي النُّهَى. So then is it not instructive to them? Have they not seen how many generations we have destroyed before them, in whose settlements they are coming and going? So these, the Meccans, they travel north and south. They travel to the south of Arabia. They travel to Yemen. They travel to the north. They travel to Syria. In these comings and goings, in their trade routes and in their business dealings, they come across these massive or some of them kind of destroyed cities that once upon a time people had lived. These were habitations, and those people are no more. Then their settlements have been destroyed. They're no longer there, whether through natural causes or maybe they become extinct for whatever reason is. Quran says, will you not think about what happened to those generations? In other words, continuity in a certain kind of process of habitation, to have success in community, to have success in your society is one of the signs of Allah's gift to you. And when those gifts are removed, when your civilization collapses, when your society collapses, very often it is understood that God's attention is no longer on you, or you don't get God's attention as exclusively as you used to get it before. This is an issue that 20th century, 21st century Muslims are grappling with, that their days of success and their days of when they were leaders of humanity somehow have eluded them in the present. These stories keep on reinforcing that those people who have lost out in history, why does that happen? And I think many Muslim thinkers are thinking about that, and each one has a different pathway to recover our role as the stewards of Allah on earth and to play the role of responsibility. So the role of responsibility doesn't mean you build big cities, but that you contribute to humanity, that humanity remembers you for what you have done, the good that you have done in the world. Whether you do it through a civilization that contained your emblems and your names and your flag, or whether you do it now in another way, that should be the challenge of how we think that we fulfill our responsibilities now. And that is the big model, the model of history. How do we see ourselves? And how do we learn about it? Because history is about self-knowing, to know who you are. And if we don't understand that, we don't get the lesson of history. We don't make the connections. We are stuck in the weeds of things, but don't get the big picture. The second big model that I get from this is فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ وَلَا تَعْجَلْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يُقْضَى إِلَيْكَ وَحْيُهُ وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. So as you know, the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to get this revelation, he tried to remember it. And, he was told, don't worry about this. We will protect the revelation for you. And he was told, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. Recite the Quran into a melodious recitation. But I think somehow, as the opening part of the surah says that, مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لِتَشْقَى. we did not send down this revelation for you to be distressed. So that message of distress and giving him reassurance. Allah is the exalted, the true ruler. Do not rush with the recital before its revelation to you is concluded. You need to get the full big picture of things, and therefore you need to also be reassured that we will protect this revelation for you. All you need to do is say, Rabbi zidni ilma. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. And that's what our prayer is always, that we're always seeking for knowledge and wisdom and insight. So that is verse 114. This anxiety of the Prophet, his fear that he will forget it, and what he's told, you just need to make a prayer. Rabbi zidni ilma. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. When your Lord increases your knowledge, you will then be able to understand things. And whether the periodic revelation that comes to you, that you don't have the full picture yet, but you will have insight into it. And once the full revelation is revealed to you, once your mission has been fully, now installed with you, and you've been fully commissioned with your tasks, even then you have to say, Rabbi zidni ilma. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. And 115 is a very interesting verse. You remember I said that the story of Adam is in this, and the whole story, parts of it is recounted again. Adam ate of the forbidden fruit. He did not listen to the commandment. But one of the things that he said, وَلَقَدْ أَهِدْنَا إِلَى آدَمْ مِنْ قَبْلِ فَنَسِيَ. This verse captures the whole story of Adam. We commissioned him before. We said, stay in paradise, stay with your partner, just don't eat from this fruit. Then Adam forgot. And then this is amazing insight. وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. We did not find resolve in him. This is a very interesting thing. We did not find resolve in him. He could not be resolute. He lacked resoluteness. In other words, he did not stay the course. This is very interesting. So first of all, this question of forgetfulness. The Quran repeats this idea of, forgetfulness. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Don't be like those who forget God and then they forget themselves. This idea of remembering and forgetting is a theme that is constantly in the Quran in different ways, in different permutations, in different forms and expressions. This idea of forgetting and remembering, because with remembrance comes resolve. Because why do you think Moosa said, كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا? When you glorify God, when you remember God, when you have God's attention on you, resolve stays firm. Doubts disappear, strengths come into your heart, courage is on your side. Your heart is filled with courage. Rabbi shrah li sadri. My Lord, expand my bosom for me. In other words, strengthen my heart. I can be courageous. So this idea of having to have resolve and to be consistent is a big theme in the Quran. We don't pay attention to this idea to be resolute. This idea to be resolute for me stood out as I was preparing and thinking about the surah. And so this is the end of my comments for you today, and how I understood the messages of the surah and the few themes that I shared with you. The question of, all of us face anxiety, we forget, but we need to find resolve. And the way we find resolve is through the remembrance and dhikrullah. And I think it is captured in what I call, we go back now, the first surah, 8 lines of Surah Taha is absolutely magisterial and moving. I can't think of the surah without remembering the early community in Mecca, Abdullah and her determination to flee this place of persecution, and Omar's great anger, and then, conversion, and that history of that early community, and the Prophet's anxiety that he is trying to take this message so seriously that he's trying to now recite it in the middle of the night, standing on one leg and trying to keep himself there. And the message is, this magisterial opening, Ar-Rahman, about the Lord who is the most gracious and to whom belongs everything that's on the earth and in the heavens and under the earth. And he knows everything, your secrets and what you try to hide, and to him belongs all the beautiful names. That's what I call the magisterial opening. I gave you a snippet of the Moosa and Harun and Pharaoh story. The scenes of the hereafter are very, of the Quran is filled with that. At every occasion we are reminded, and we did, talk about that in this next store, in the question of, in the big model lesson, what is the lesson of history? What happens to those who obey and what happens to those who disobey, and that they will be in a state of misery. And that is the state, the story of the hereafter, and Adam's forgetting of the commandment not to eat the forbidden fruit. I thank you. We have a couple of minutes for questions and for comments. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Shukran so much, Ebrahim, once again, for a fascinating, intriguing presentation. And I'm sure many people here would have appreciated your reflections and sharing your reflections with us on the surah. We've literally got like 3 minutes. If there are any burning questions.
Questions, not comments.
Yes,
because the comment can take up 3 minutes. So very quickly, because I know you people have iftar very soon there. So we don't want to, we want to have some good resolve.
Okay, so there's one question by Khadija. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question very quickly, please?
Or maybe people can type their questions, and if they want to send the question.
I was just going to say.
Yes,
it's going to take me too long to type. Shukran, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. I just want to refer to verse 6. You mentioned that we are the custodian of this earth. We are supposed to look after the earth. How do you explain what is happening in Cape Town, in the oceans where the government is trying to dig for fuel, for oil? I mean, now, when you approach the Muslim community, especially the political leaders, the Muslim leaders, when in the Quran it mentions climate change is mentioned 67 times in the Quran, but yet they just give you a wide berth.
Yeah. Thank you. This will take a lot of time, but I think, we've been given the responsibility to use the resources on the earth, but we're also asked to use it responsibly. And if we now realize that fossil fuels, and now knowledge is there that fossil fuels are the cause of our environmental degradation, then we have to think about this in creative ways. I understand people are going to say that, they don't have, many other alternatives and so on, but I think we need to think about this, and there are many answers to this. A man that I read a lot is a man called Lovelock. Lovelock has argued, he's in England, he's 102 years old, and he's been a great scientist. Lovelock has been saying that instead of He says, look, it's already too late for our globe in terms of environmental degradation and so on, but I think we can slow it down. He's urging us to go towards nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is safer and cleaner, he says, and it will serve us more effectively. And there are ways of disposing of nuclear energy in safe ways. This might be very controversial to some, but that's something to consider. I don't have all the answers to this environmental challenge, but I do think that we need to collectively think about it. And I'm hoping that political leaders all over, not only in Cape Town, but elsewhere also think about this in more creative ways. Thank you for that question.
I mean.
Shukran, Ebrahim. I think that we can end it there. It's exactly 5 o'clock. I'm not sure if Imam Rashid is still with us, if he wanted to give another vote of thanks to end. But before he does so, I want to thank both of you, actually, Ebrahim for doing this last session and Imam Rashid for doing the other 3 sessions for Ramadan. It really has been wonderful to spend our Sunday afternoons in this way. And I, speaking for myself, but many others, we really have valued the sharing of reflections in the way that both of you have. So shukran once again to both Professor Ebrahim Moosa and Imam Rashid. And I'm not sure if Imam Rashid wants to give a closing remark there, or thanks. Shukran.
Yes, shukran, Professor Ebrahim Moosa. It's really been a wonderful feast, in reflecting on Surah Taha. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, keep you healthy, Amen. And grant you the strength to continue this wonderful teaching that you have done. And we are really deeply grateful for your sacrifice of this time. I'm sure that many of us have benefited from this. And we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and your family. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wal asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Assalamu alaikum.